Someone raise their hand. Oh, Clarissa.
I think saying hi.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
So we have a question already. They're coming in. Great. This is where I need like the elevator music in the background.
I know we had like our lo-fi beats going today for the clothing swap in the office. And I was like, we might need to have this on all the time. It's kind of nice.
Yes, I left my door open for that too.
Did you? Nice.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for being here. We'll do some introductions really quick. My name is Marlena Yang. I'm a senior career coach in the College of Liberal Arts Career Services. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be one of your moderators today.
And I am Holly. I am the other moderator today. I am also a career coach in CLA Career Services and use she, her pronouns. And I went through the job search process last year, so I'm really excited to hear everybody else's perspectives on it because I know it can be a really challenging journey. And then I think next on our introductions list, if it's okay, is I'll pass it to Laura.
Yeah, hello. When I saw my name was first, I was like, uh-oh, I'm the first to introduce myself. My name is Laura and my pronouns are she, her. I graduated in December of 2019 from the U. I studied sociology and then minored in mass communication and business management. And then currently I work at Securian Financial, which is a life insurance company in downtown St. Paul. And I'm a learning and development senior analyst. So I design and facilitate training. So Marlena and Holly, you're doing great. So facilitators.
Great. And then Audrey.
Hello, my name is Audrey. I use she, her pronouns. I am majoring in communications and Spanish studies. I am graduating this May, so I am still amidst the job search student scene. So I'm looking for their opportunities in the communications field, and I'm currently a peer coach for CLA Career Services, as well as an earned media intern with BBK.
Awesome. Thank you, Audrey. Devin.
Hello, I'm Devin Stewart. I'm a data analyst and evaluations specialist for Ramsey County. And yeah, I don't remember if there were more questions.
Nope, that's great. Sounds good. And then Emerson.
Hi, my name is Emerson. I use they, them pronouns. I am a senior administrative associate in the School of Public Health, the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health. And I have been in the workforce for a decade. And so I have had various experiences, not just right out of college with job searching and rejection. Yeah.
Thanks, Emerson. And then Carrie.
Hi there, my name's Carrie, she, her pronouns. I graduated in December of 2018. My focus was geography. I got my Bachelor of Science in Geography. My focus was climate science, and I minored in sustainability studies. I like to say I got a history minor too, but I was just one class shy of it, so not on my papers. I am currently a sustainability specialist with a nonprofit organization called Minnesota Wastewise. So I work with businesses to help them find grant funding to implement sustainable business practices.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. And then Ian is our special guest speaker. So Ian won't be technically sitting on the panel, but we'll be sharing some insights later on. So Ian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, grateful to be here. My name is Ian Evans, he, him pronouns. I'm a staff psychologist at the Student Counseling Services here at the University of Minnesota, and I'm just grateful to share this space with everyone.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. It's great to hear a little bit about where you're coming from. And then just a little bit of background about why we thought there was a need for this event. Marlene and I meet with students in one-on-one appointments, and we often see students have we have conversations with students that intersect with career and mental health, especially with the job search process, because it is so challenging and can involve a lot of aspects of your identity and mental health, like I said. So we're really grateful for you guys joining us. And we will kick off with our first question, which is, tell us about your rejection story. And I might have Laura start, if that's okay.
Yeah, yep. I was trying to think of the best way to sum it up in like a sentence, but my rejection story just has a lot to do with timing. I know I mentioned I graduated in December, so I already felt weird about the timing of my journey at school. And I remember, I think it was even in the calendar invite, right? It can take 3 to 6 months to find a job. So I started looking in like August and September. It felt very far in advance. And we can talk about that as we go. But I mean, over the 5 months of my last semester, I mean, to put it into number perspectives, because I think that's helpful, I ended up applying to like 19 different jobs. I only heard back from 6 companies and interviewed with 6. And I didn't get a job offer until like the end of December after my semester was done and after I'd graduated. So it was a test of patience and just timing. So yes, lots of rejections within the 19 people that I like interviewed with. So we can talk about that as we go, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Audrey, do you want to talk a little bit about if you have a rejection story, or as you're searching, how that's felt?
Yeah, one specific one would have been my spring semester of my junior year. So about a year ago, I was looking for summer internships. I think there's a lot of pressure on college students to be finding summer internships after that sophomore, junior year level. It felt very intense. I interviewed with a great HR company. It was a fully remote part-time position. Went through 2 different interviews and was looking to speak to the director of the department next. After a week of about no communication, I received a, sorry, your availability doesn't fit with our schedule anymore. Very blatant after feeling like things were going super well. It was kind of a hard stop. So that was difficult, especially when you feel that pressure to have an internship. Overcame that. Things, work out as they do. But that was, my rejection story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is so much pressure to, like, even with internships. That's a great point. Devin, how about you?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I forgot to mention that I studied economics and public policy, and I started applying in March of before graduation, because I was like, I particularly had to focus on like public jobs, like in the government, which because of the way the government works, it's very slow. So it's like I'll give myself lots of time, and I ended up, putting. I think I checked my cover letter folder I had way back when I did that search, and I think there were 30 cover letters in there, and I was sending them out for months and months and months, and I didn't actually get a full-time job until October. I think late October, it might have been early November. I don't exactly remember, but yeah. And so the timeline on top of just, and they don't always, even the government will reject. They will reject you. Generally, the rule they have to tell you, but when is much more. They'll wait. They'll take their time to tell you that you don't get this job. So that was pretty difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Emerson?
The world of academia is similar to that. As I'm sure y'all who work for the U as well know, we take our time here, and so that you can send out many applications and not hear back, and maybe not ever hear back. And I think for me, that has been one of the hardest rejections to deal with over and over again throughout the various job changes that I have done, is the not hearing. And I think that's probably true for most people who go through this process. Like getting to the last round and being like one of 2 people left and not getting the job you have now really emotionally invested in does suck. It does. But at that point also, you've gotten to know some of the interviewers a little bit. You can do like a post interview talk with them and be like, hey, so like if I'm interested in this kind of thing, what can I do better next time, or how would you recommend X, Y, and Z? But like the not hearing back, just there's nothing that is so soul destroying as that. So yeah, I mean, one of our questions is like, what kind of advice do you have? And I will circle back to that later, but that's an outlet for that frustration.
Yeah, I know. And we hear from employers that they get frustrated getting ghosted by students, but I feel like it happens even more often that employers are ghosting students. So appreciate you bringing that up. Carrie, how about you?
First of all, I agree with you, Emerson. Not hearing anything after you've put so much effort into your application or even the interview, if you make it to that stage, is a certain level of brutal, is not hearing anything. I think my rejection story, I was trying to summarize this and what does it look like and how do I put this into perspective, because it happened a lot. I was applying for jobs, and I'll go into what my job search process was like, but a little bit later. But I got into Green Corps after college, and so I had rejection up until I got that position. And for those of you that don't know, Green Corps is an AmeriCorps program. It's only 11 months. Then you have to move on. So then I had to apply for jobs again, and I got my position that I'm currently in. And so I think my rejection story is, it happens a lot, and you have to learn how to move on. And I think that's something I'm still trying to learn as I continue to want to look for further areas for growth in my career, is that, one day I'll be applying for jobs again and it'll happen again. And it happens to all of us. Doesn't make it easy at all, but we've all been rejected once or twice. And Laura, Devin, I have both of you beat. My first time applying for jobs, I applied for 92 positions. So, I'll get into more of that in the later questions, but for those of you that are joining us today, hang in there.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, it's very vulnerable. Thank you for being vulnerable in this setting. It does require you to revisit some of those like tough times when you're navigating that. It's very emotional. But I hope that if you are in positions where you are hiring people, that you don't ghost people, right? I think because you have more of that empathy, especially going through this experience. So if you're in a hiring position, you can build that into your practice as well. So, right. So the next question here is, what barriers did you come across while job searching? I know a couple of you will be answering this kind of like popcorn style. So Audrey, yeah.
Yeah, so as an undergraduate student, I cannot echo enough that entry-level positions, meeting the experience required for many of these entry-level positions is probably one of the biggest barriers I've faced. I know many of my peers have faced those as well. It feels like it says entry level and 3 years of experience in communications or a programming software or anything is required, and you just immediately feel knocked down by that. Before you even apply, you feel like you're not good enough for the position. So that's definitely the number one barrier that I've come across. Along with that, having the required skills or certifications as a communications major, Salesforce, any other type of like mass communication software. They're not teaching that in the classes that I'm taking. So if you're not in a position where you get to have that hands-on experience, it can be really difficult to feel qualified and well qualified for the positions. Thirdly, to echo what all of you have said, being ghosted, especially in an entry-level position, applying for internships, to really put time and effort into a resume and cover letter when you're at kind of those beginning stages of your career development. It kind of hurts to not hear back, but making sure to not let that, really knock you down, because it's not about you. Likely there's hundreds of candidates. It is a bit difficult. And then lastly, the barrier of personal conflict. Sometimes it feels like maybe I'm applying for jobs and it's not what I really want. Maybe I'm applying just because maybe the salary looks good. Maybe I do feel well qualified for it. But aligning your interests and values and passions with the job you want, maybe in the salary range that you want, that can be difficult, but really taking the time to do that research and network and kind of cross that barrier is important.
Yeah, a very important point. I think connecting it with your values can help you make a confident career decision and being very intentional about the search, right? So sometimes for some folks, it's like quality over quantity. And that might work for you. So tailoring materials is definitely a key thing. How about you, Devin? What barriers did you come across while job searching?
The first barrier I found really was, like I mentioned earlier, was like time. Was like I didn't have, I had set aside like I have this much money to work for this, to wait this long. I know it's going to take a long time. Start early. I did all of this preparation. Even among like my peers who I knew were applying to similar jobs, I felt like I had a similar experience to them. In some cases, I thought I had much better experience than them. And then even for jobs, I was like, I feel really confident I can at least get an interview. I would wait like 2, 3, 4 months sometimes to get a response. And like, like in that time, like you don't have anything, like I just graduated. I don't have anything to do. Everyone I know is either at work or also looking for jobs. So there's this just sort of this constant sort of stress of like, is it going to come today? Does it come today? Check my application status pending. That doesn't mean anything. It's not helpful, And so there was the time was probably the one that I felt like was weighing on me the most. Just like, it's taking forever.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was hard to come over. And then sort of a smaller, but slightly more material one was that I didn't have a car at the time. Mm-hmm. And, I was mostly applying for public jobs, like I mentioned, and those are mostly in like big downtown areas. So you can usually take public transit, but, you put on your nice clothes and then you got to get on the bus, and then, you get a little sweaty, and you have plenty of time to just fret over all the things that you're going to do wrong in the interview. And so that was, it wasn't a huge barrier, but there were times where it was like, I don't think I can get, occasionally, my roommate let me borrow their car a couple times. That was nice. But overall, I felt like I didn't, there were certain jobs that I was like, I don't know if I can get there in like a timely fashion without getting an Uber or something. And I'm kind of low on money right now, so I really don't want to pay for an Uber. But so I say that was another barrier. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of factors to really calculate in your mind, as you are job searching, because that can impact your search process. Thank you. Right.
Yeah, I appreciate too, like the diversity of barriers you guys talked about, like what's a barrier for one person might not be for another person, right? And that makes it super different from even like your close friends that are looking for jobs too. So thanks for speaking to the kind of the wide range of barriers that can come up for folks. Okay, and then our next question is, what was your job search process like after graduation or heading into graduation, and how did it feel? And I'll have Carrie start if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate hearing from my fellow panelists who said they started their job search before they even graduated. I was not one of those people. I was so focused on my senior thesis and finishing out my finals, and I was graduating in December. It wasn't something I really was putting that much energy into. I think I applied for maybe 1 or 2 jobs before I graduated, but I was very much of the mindset like that's a problem for after I graduate. In my head, I very much had, and I don't know where I got these notions from, but I very much thought I'm graduating in December. I'm ahead of the May rush, right? And I have all this time after graduation. I can apply for jobs. Like I can make applying for job my full-time job, and I'll get something right away and it'll be perfect. And I had this kind of idealist idea of what my kind of job search process was going to be like. And for me, it very much wasn't like that. I got to, I think it was graduated in December, and I got to March and I still hadn't even so much as gotten an interview request. And I think that's really truly when my mental health started to tank. Like Are they even seeing my resumes? Do I even exist to these people? Do they see me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my application? I had gotten out of, CLA being pumped up to your degree is so important. It means something and it's really great. And then I wasn't seeing that. And it was very, very frustrating. And I ended up just getting a retail job. Those, again, very hard on the mental health, that retail job, while I continued to apply for positions. And I was able to get that job through Green Corps. And I felt very, very fortunate that Green Corps had a whole bunch of resources at the end of my service year to help me find employment afterwards that I wish I had done in college, right? However, after Green Corps, COVID had hit. And so even if I had all the resources and now I had experience, whereas before these job postings, like Audrey was mentioning, saying it's entry level, but you need 3 years of experience. Well, now I had an internship and now I had a year of service. Now there's COVID. And it was kind of the early years of COVID where things were shut down and a lot of places were on hiring freezes. So I once again was kind of brought into this rejection atmosphere. And I very much remember my interview for the job that I have now. I got into the elevator to get up to the interview and I noticed I had a rip in my tights and I was wearing a pencil skirt that was a high-waisted pencil skirt down to just below, just right above my knees, and great large rip in my tights. And I'm like, finally getting my chance to get in front of an interviewer. It took months to do, and I have a rip in my tights. And so I remember shimmying my skirt down lower to try to make it work. And I somehow got the job that I have now, but it was not a linear process. It very much wasn't, you graduate, you get the perfect job, and now you've started your career. And I think I very much was not prepared for that, both financially and mentally. I was not prepared for what that would look like for me. I wish I would have started applying for jobs much, much sooner. How did it feel? That's the second part of this question. And I think when I got my job, it felt like a victory, but I think very much the searching process. I don't know what age range everyone is, but if you've seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, my job process very much felt like Bueller, like I'm just kind of shouting out there and nobody's hearing me and nobody's responding to me. And it was a dark place and it was very challenging. And I think Audrey mentioned it earlier, or maybe it was Devin, that there were a lot of feelings of, am I enough? Maybe what's wrong with me that I'm not getting these positions? But keeping in mind, there's 100 of candidates most likely for a lot of these positions, and it's not you. It's often a whole bunch of factors, and sometimes a lot of them can be outside of your control. But without, answering the other questions, I think I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carrie. I also feel like it is a reality for so many folks that they're not able to start the job search because you're, like you said, you're finishing your thesis, you're trying to make the most of the last semester of your college career, you're figuring out how long your finances can stretch, whatever it is. So that is a reality for so many folks, and so frustrating. And then Laura, how about you?
Oh, I've been ready for this question, y'all. I feel like the first part was what was the process, before graduating, or what that job search looked like. And it was interesting, Carrie, you talk about graduating in December too. I think we had almost different mindsets about it. I was like, oh my gosh, because the field that I'm in right now, learning and development, usually it's part of human resources at companies. And my field is pretty creative still. I like to think that I have fun. But a lot of peers that I was seeing were in either Carlson or just other majors where they were on pipelines already, where, going into the fall semester, a lot of people I knew that had jobs that I wanted already had offers lined up for the spring. So, even though I was graduating early, I totally felt behind already. And so that was hard, and I wouldn't change anything about my major. I think it's actually a really good thing, like working in a field and having a liberal arts degree, but it really like set me up to compare myself to other people. And if you are not feeling your best, your interviewers will see that. You're not going to be as excited about the search. And I definitely felt that. I think another thing that I wanted to talk about too, and it was interesting, Carrie, just like I said, like our different perspectives with December graduations. There was such like a financial like stressor on me too. I felt like I needed to know what my next steps were. I don't feel like I was in the position where I could wait. So that was an extra hard thing too, just the last semester. And then it's probably, we don't have to talk about it too much, but the ghosting thing, oh my gosh. You would apply for roles and just not hear anything back. I know there were some companies where I applied multiple times, and because I already was comparing myself to other people who felt miles ahead of me, it was hard because on paper, I felt like I had everything I needed. I had internships, I had jobs on campus, my grades were good. And I felt really fortunate for all of that. But even though I wasn't hearing back from people, it made it almost feel worse because I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I did what I needed to do and it was just nothing. So it's such an issue of timing. There's never like a great time. It's always going to be that way. And yeah, just being on a different path than other people, even if you're like looking for the same end goal, was something that I had to learn along the way. So.
So interesting. Oh, go ahead, Holly.
I was just going to say, I say to students all the time, I wish I had a t-shirt that said, stop comparing yourself to your Carlson friends. Because it is like such a different like field and market. And it's so difficult when they know 2 years out sometimes. Like it's so different. But yeah, thanks for sharing, Laura.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear kind of your perspectives as like December grads, but like your timeline and where you were, you were in different places. And as being a first generation college student myself, I thought that my degree was my ticket to a job. Like I can start later on. Like I don't need, like, it's going to guarantee me a job. It's a golden ticket. And it was a hard reality when it was like, oh no, that's not the case. There's more involved in the process. So I hear you, Carrie, when you share that. I was like, yeah, I was there too. But also the planner in me was like thinking early as well, like Laura. Thank you. But for the next question that we have here, we'll have Emerson answer this question first. What do you wish you knew at the time that you learned after going through the process? So again, what do you wish you knew at the time that you learned after going through the process?
Yeah, so I think that in many ways we have all touched on this already, but the job application process takes a lot of emotional bandwidth. You have to talk yourself into emotionally investing in whatever job you apply for to some degree in order to sound good in your cover letter, in order to choose effective words for your resume, in order to show up well in the interview. All of this is an emotional investment. And it is really hard to, every single time you apply for a job, try to come up with those things from scratch every time. So templates is your only way to save some of this emotional bandwidth for your own self and life. I not just for your resume and cover letter, but templates for the thank you emails that you send, templates for the thank you emails that you send after interviews, the thank you emails that you send after rejections, templates for the no thank you emails for people who are asking you to interview and you are not interested after all. All of this stuff. If you have all of that ready to go, you don't have to spend those spoons in the moment. So yeah. Do it ahead of time when you have the bandwidth.
Thank you for the hot tip. Yes. just easier and more effective and time saving. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, I think this one, I was like, I still am such a huge social science nerd. So I wanted to talk about something that I learned my last semester actually, and it rang so true. There's this idea of like strong versus weak ties. So strong ties are people that you're like very close to. It's usually like family and friends, mentors, things of that nature. And then there's weak ties, which are people that are just like acquaintances. So people you've maybe had a class with or like a past coworker. And I thought that, going into my job search, that it was all about the people that I was strongly connected to, and that's how I was going to find a job. And I got kind of resentful because I was the first person in my family to get a bachelor's. I'm the first person in my family to work in kind of a corporate environment. And so I just didn't have any like strong connections to folks who were doing what I wanted to do. And I kind of, like I said, I got a little angsty, and I was like, I'm not going to find a job because I don't have anyone to help me. But what I've learned, and this is my third job after graduating, and every position that I've gotten has been because of weak ties, people that I barely know, but it was just enough to say, oh, I know someone at this company, or I had an informational interview with this person, like maybe they have something that would be helpful. And the good thing about that, right, your strong ties take a long time to build, but your weak ties don't. So even if you are feeling like networking and things of that sort are scary, and you hear about it's who you know, not what you know, even though there's like truth to that, the weak ties are what will help you. And those are the easy ones to get started on building. So don't feel like you're behind, because there's always room to do that stuff and it goes faster. So
Yeah.
Social sciences shtick.
Leverage all your connections, regardless of how the quality of the relationship is. They can be acquaintances or just someone you met at the career fair, and reconnecting with those folks, even on LinkedIn. Thank you. And then Carrie, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I definitely want to echo what Emerson and Laura said, but just to add to it a little bit, I wish I would have known that everyone has to start somewhere. In my head, I had my dream job, and that's what I kept applying for. The problem is my dream job needs like 10 years of experience. So I was counting myself out when I was looking at these dream jobs, because I was like, I don't have that much experience, so I'm not going to apply for it. Or I'm going to apply for it anyways, but clearly I'm not qualified. So I was getting a lot of rejection. So I was applying for jobs that I clearly was not advanced enough yet to succeed in that type of a position. So I really wish I would have known you have to start somewhere. So even if the job position doesn't look like it's your perfect job, it doesn't look like it's your dream job, there's still value that you can get out of every job. And it's still a stepping stone towards that career that you want. So try to apply for more of those jobs. I also wish that I would have known not to count myself out, because I think my first time around, I was just shooting for whatever I could. My second time around after Green Corps, if it didn't have exactly what my qualifications were, I wasn't applying for it. I was counting myself out of the game. And I think some of that was harboring some of that pain that I felt from my first round of rejections. I remember speaking with my fiance, my then boyfriend, and he was like, well, why don't you apply for it? I'm like, well, you need 3 years of experience. He's like, well, you have 2.5. And I'm like, but that's not 3, so I shouldn't apply. And so don't count yourself out. You have a lot more worth than you think you do.
That's great advice. Thank you all. Okay. So, I cut off the W, sorry. So kind of moving forward to like how you're feeling now about rejection. What are your views on rejection now, and what has rejection taught you? And I'll start with Audrey.
Yeah, I think the first thing that rejection taught me is to give yourself space to be bummed out, to be kind of upset. Oftentimes it is so hard to keep up with like a 24/7 optimism. I'll get them next time, like next one, that's going to be the perfect one. Giving yourself space to be like, you know what, that wasn't great. That doesn't feel great. Treat yourself to a coffee or something small that just makes your day, because it's inevitable. Sometimes it's just going to happen, and giving yourself that space to feel those emotions and kind of move forward more positively, I think is so beneficial. Secondly, asking a recruiter, I had a friend who just did this. If they're not fit for the position that they may have been rejected from, is there another position open in the company that their skill set may be better fit for? Do they have a connection to maybe another company that's also hiring a similar position? Reaching out, Laura mentioned, like to those weak ties, or even seeking those out, those could be your next step towards acceptance or another job or something that you're going to love. So trying to make those weak ties, maybe seeing if there's anything left before you send that final thank you for your time email. And then it may sound a little obvious, but rejection is redirection. It's not the end all be all. You'll get to where you need to be. Obviously, it is so much easier said than done. It is so hard to be patient, and that's so real. But ultimately, that redirection, that might put you in the job that you really want to be at, the place you really want to work at, with people who you really want to work with. So keeping all that in mind, that's what I would think.
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. I appreciate that you mentioned like you can do those things simultaneously, right? Like you can hold your emotions, you can be applying for jobs, and you can be like pursuing weak ties or whatever other way that you're like developing yourself career-wise, like all at the same time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Emerson, could you answer?
Yes. I think definitely would like to echo Audrey about giving yourself time. For me, that's part of what the templates do, is then I can send that out, and past Emerson, could be polite and also sincere, while current Emerson was going through it. But the other thing that rejection has taught me is kind of what my values are, because the things that I cared about more hurt more, and that helped me figure out what I really did want to invest in and who I wanted to follow up with, to have more informational interviews, and what kind of directions that I maybe wanted to explore more for myself. And I think that was really valuable. I think it's really important because rejection is just part of the job search. Like maybe 1 in a million people are going to be hired for the first job they apply for and work for that job forever. But most of us are going to be rejected. And so it's really a good idea to decide right now, before you even start it, that this is just part of learning. This is part of it. And you can own it as a choice that you are making, is choosing to be rejected. And it feels a little bit better.
Yes. Love the opportunity to empower yourself in that way. That's awesome. And then Devin, I think you had a story you could share about this. Is that right?
Yeah, I have 2 very specific stories that taught me valuable lessons. So the first one is that there was this position I really wanted, and I had gotten 2 interviews, and I felt like I was a good match, and I felt like I was interviewing well. They had me take some sort of like skills test that I thought I did well, but they don't tell you to do well. Of course they don't. And I felt like it was going really well. And I knew that one of my classmates had made it as far as I had, because he was posting about it on Facebook. And I knew that the things that they were testing us on, and the things that they were asking, and the things that job was like, those are things that I knew more about just from classes we took. We were sort of friends. I knew what he was interested in. And I was like, okay, I'm like, at least I'm gonna get, if this is the other person I'm against, like I feel really good. And then I found out through Facebook status that I did not get the job and that they did get the job. And then they told me like a month later, which I really appreciated. And it was in that moment that I was like, this is not fair. Like, what the heck? This is garbage. I hate this. And what I learned was that I learned that you really can't compare yourself to other people. It just doesn't help you. I spent all this time hyping myself up in part so that I could, do good on all this stuff, but also just because I was like, oh, if he's my competition, I'll blow him away. I did not blow him away. And the other thing I learned from that experience was that sometimes it's just not fair. Like, I really still to this day feel like I think I should have been the one they picked, but they didn't, and that sucks. And I don't think it's fair, but that's just how it works sometimes, and it sucks. And we all think it sucks, but you get if you're gonna get a job, you're just gonna have to sort of put yourself through some experiences that are probably gonna feel kind of unfair. And then the other story, which has a happier ending, was that I applied for a different job, and I made it to the final round of interviews, and I got rejected. And at that point, I needed to turn my energy elsewhere, get a part-time job, just make up a little extra cash, and sort of rebuild my morale to put out another billion cover letters. And about a month into the job, it had been about 2 months I'd been rejected. They reached out to me and were like, do you still want this position? Are you still interested in this position? And I responded immediately, yes. And for whatever reason, it did not work out with the person they ended up hiring. And they put me through a very short interview process, and then they hired me within a day. And so I didn't actually send the thank you for interviewing me email, which in my mind, I was like, that's why I didn't get it. But, it did work out in the end. So just because you get rejected, I'm not saying bet that everybody's going to call you back in a month, but it does not everything you're doing is moving towards the goal. Even getting rejected is moving towards the goal. So keeping that in mind is when I inevitably go back on the job market, I need to remember how I got my current job, which is that I had to get rejected first. So just sort of keeping in mind that everything you're doing is moving you towards your goal eventually, even if it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Laura, how about you?
I liked how Audrey said the rejection is redirection. I actually had that in my notes. And I think the thing that I wanted to add to that, even if you're rejected, the interviewing that you get to go through, that's practice, and you'll just do better next time. And I think every company that I've been rejected from, when I look back, I think about just my interactions with interviewers and things like that. And it's so important to remember, yes, they're interviewing you, but you're trying to figure out what you appreciate and value, and you're interviewing them too. So that's the short and sweet. So Audrey, we're on the same wavelength.
Thanks for adding that. Moving on to advice and also helpful things that were helpful to you. Could you share what was helpful for you while you were job searching, including any support and resources that you had? And Carrie, you could start us off with that one.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short and sweet here. I think what was the biggest help for me was absolutely just self-care. As a lot of my fellow panelists have touched on, it's very emotionally involving to not only put yourself out there, but then to be rejected as well. So I really try to ramp up the self-care during the whole job searching process and try to be kind to myself. I try to reframe things. I'm a very anxious person, so it's not always the easiest thing to do, but truly just ramp up the self-care. And then resources, you don't necessarily know what those resources might be. You don't know who I believe you called it your weak connections, Laura. You don't know what they might know. So reach out to those people you wouldn't have thought of. Put a post on LinkedIn, be vulnerable and ask folks if they know who's hiring, if their company might be hiring. I think that has been the most helpful to me in my job search thus far, and I'll probably rely on those when I job search in the future as well.
Awesome, thank you. And just because of time, I will hand it off to Ian to kind of share, and I feel like Ian would be able to add some advice on that too. And we did have a question come through, and I feel like Ian maybe might be able to address this too, and when our panelists kind of have any other last minute pieces to share. But how can I reassure myself when I'm anxiously waiting to hear back after a final interview? For example, my mind races all day. I can't stop checking my email. I start telling myself I haven't heard back yet because they probably offered the job to someone else, or that they will never get back to me. Just a lot of self-doubt in general. How do I handle that limbo? When I mean, it sounds very distracting, right? You're like, I can only check my email. I can't do anything else. So yeah, Ian, love to hear kind of any, what you like to share, just given what everyone has shared today, and any of the intersection of like mental health and career reactions that you have.
Absolutely. We've got some incredibly wise folks on this panel, and so hopefully I can add some additional pieces to what's already been shared. Pardon my dog, she's getting a bit anxious over here, or excited rather. So I'm going to share just 3 little slides. I'm going to go from them that I've prepared. One about the job search process in general. The second part focusing primarily on rejection, and the last part focusing on taking care and what that's going to look like. So I do just want to highlight for the job search process within this space, I want this to be balanced in some ways. So there's one where it can feel pretty exciting. We're at this is kind of what we've as college students have been working for. I too am a first generation student and was like, oh, I can finally do this for the first time and enter the workforce that people have been telling me to do for forever. So there was lots of hope and optimism that was kind of associated with that. But I also found it was quite exhausting within that. And within that exhaustion, lots of social comparison. I was looking at other people within my field who had gotten jobs, gotten their dream jobs, gotten higher paying jobs, more lucrative jobs, all the things that you're like, why am I not getting these things? And so that social comparison is inevitably going to be there. And I want to add in some layers to it. That social comparison and the job search process is layered based on how we walk through the world with both visible and invisible identities that are there. So I want that to be a very, at least a point that's validated throughout this process too, that at least can be touched on. And there's going to be inevitable rejection. I don't have the statistics on people who graduate from college and get their first job and they work it for the rest of their lives, but I bet it's very slim within this. I will admit, University of Minnesota is not my first job right out of grad school. I would always wanted to work here, but y'all weren't hiring when I was in the job search process for the first time. So this is inevitably going to be there, where maybe a job opportunity isn't present right now and we have to wait a bit, or we might get rejected from some of these opportunities. And so within that rejection, like simply defined, it's the experience of not being included, not being accepted, or not being approved of. And it can feel really bad. And so I want us to just reflect, take a moment, take a second. It's not just not getting a job. It might be getting rejected from your first college choice. It might be a rejection in a romantic relationship or a friendship that is there. Maybe I won't psychoanalyze us too much, but maybe our parents weren't as accepting of us as who we wanted to be. So we all have a relationship with rejection that can come up during this process too, that we don't think about. And so it can have an impact. We might have false beliefs of oneself. We might think we're unlovable, we're undeserving, we're not worthy of these things. We can experience something in our field called learned helplessness, where if we experience some rejection over certain periods of time, what's the point of even applying again and going into something else? And then lastly, when we go through rejection, we have a need to feel safe. And so we might put up emotional walls and we might not take the risks that we want to do that can lead to a more fulfilling career that we might be searching for. And then lastly, I want to highlight the importance of taking care. And within this, I don't want to bring in kind of the framework of toxic positivity where it's just like, this is all great and here's why this rejection is the best feeling in the world, because that doesn't do anything to our actual reality. So I want us to acknowledge and allow yourself to grieve and that loss of the job opportunity that was there. But we can grieve with positive intention. And what I mean by that is it's going to be sad. It's going to hurt. There's going to be pain, but take care while you're doing it, making sure that you're getting your nutrition, making sure you're going for a walk, get some sleep. However you connect with maybe a romantic partner or a friend, connect with them in those ways. Socialize, play, do what you need to do to kind of do those things alongside the grief and loss. The other piece that comes with rejection that we want to do while we're taking care is avoiding self-blame. So finding some flaw within us, because very rarely does an HR give us the actual reason as to why they're rejecting us. They don't actually give us the, hey, actually, you remember that torn piece of clothing that you had in the interview? That's actually why you didn't get the job. But they're never going to be that transparent with us. Or it was this answer to this question. They're very rarely going to do that. And so what we want to do to combat self-blame is bring in self-compassion. So speaking compassionately and kindly to ourselves the way that a friend or a family member might. And alongside that, seeking and utilizing social support, however that might be. The other piece we want to do when we're taking care is zooming out. And what I mean by that is let's look at the full scope of the situation and recognize we are not defined by the scope of this rejection. We are so much more than this, so many other pieces of our mind in our world that are more than this job opportunity that's lost. And then lastly, when we're taking care, I like to live by a mantra of controlling what we can control and determining next steps. So when one door closes, another door is inevitably going to open. As we've heard from our panelists here tonight, so many opportunities can happen from this. So we can learn from this experience and go adjust accordingly when the time is right. So want to highlight that. I'm mindful of time and I will cede my microphone here.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, Ian. I just wrote down, I haven't heard that term grieve with positive intention. I really appreciate that because I think something that everyone mentioned is like, it's so important to give yourself space and like permission to grieve those things, but so important to take care of yourself while you're doing that. So thank you for that piece too.
Yeah, so panelists, I believe, oh yeah, Audrey, I was going to see if, if you wanted to add anything else to like what was helpful for you, and then we can give our panelists a final say on like what last pieces of advice they'd like to share.
Definitely career services. I cannot emphasize enough how good it feels to sit down. Peer coaches, other peer staff, or career coaches that can sit down, walk through a resume, a cover letter, whether or not you've started them, whether or not you've finished them, whether or not you know what you're applying to, what field you want to be in. It just feels so good to have help, especially navigating something that oftentimes seems very ambiguous. And then secondly, emphasizing what you do know and the skills you do have. It's so easy to feel like you don't have the qualifications and the years of experiences, but little do you know, every experience you have has value, and there is something that can be applied towards any, position, whether it be internship, full-time job, or volunteer opportunity. So just know there is so much more you can emphasize than what you lack. And career services was definitely a help in seeing those things.
Yeah, definitely. Don't undermine your abilities. So when you're communicating about your experiences, don't say, well, I don't have this experience, but instead you can say, I'm eager to learn more about A, B, and C. So considering like the tone of how you communicate your skills. Thank you for that. And then Emerson, what last piece of advice? Sounds like you wanted to share some tidbits on that with our students.
Yeah. So one of them is sort of inspired by this anonymous question that we got about a racing mind. And my tidbit about that is, remember that this is not the last opportunity that you will have. This one job that you've applied for that you're really anxious about getting or not getting isn't the last time that you will have an opportunity to do something really cool that you want to do. Even if it is a really unique job, there will be other cool things that you want to do, and they will come up and you will eventually get one of those opportunities. So help yourself away from this by remembering that this isn't the only one. And then also, I think, we've all talked about this frustration of like not hearing back, the frustration of rejection, the lack of confidence that can start eating away at you. And confidence is so important in interviewing and in writing your cover letters and all of that stuff. And anger sounds a lot like confidence when you're writing. So much like Hemingway's advice of write drunk and edit sober, my advice is write self-righteously angry and then edit after that, because your word choices will be more powerful.
Oh, I love that. The passion.
And it's
in
also
writing.
very cathartic.
Yes. To our participants who are attending today, use the Q&A. We do have a couple minutes here, but while we wait for some questions to come in, anything else from our panelists that you'd like to share? I'd also include in the chat a student evaluation for our attendees to complete as well, and for your feedback, so I'll include that as well.
Yeah, I think one last piece of advice I would have is just to echo what my fellow panelists and the moderators have been saying is you will get a job. You will eventually. All of us on this panel, the guest speaker, the moderators, we have jobs. You will get a job. It takes some patience and it takes rejection, but it will happen. You can have confidence in that.
I love that. I feel like another thing that I always tell myself is things make more sense in hindsight. So even if it felt like the best opportunity at the time and it didn't work out, like 6 months, a year, maybe even a few weeks later, like it'll make more sense to you in the bigger picture of things. And then one thing, so in my first job, someone asked me my first couple of weeks, like, what are your hobbies? And so the question that someone asked, right, pour into yourself. My only hobbies were like doing my homework and reading my textbooks. So while you're in this process of like job searching, pour into yourself, do things that interest you, because that's something that you can talk to your interviewers about as well. And then lastly, we're your weak ties now too. So if you're on LinkedIn, for whoever's here, like just shoot a message, right? We're all here to help you.
Yeah, feel free to put your LinkedIn URLs in the chat if you're comfortable, if you have time. I know we are at time now, we didn't get any questions from our participants, but thank you, everyone. I want to thank for such a great conversation this evening, and I want to be mindful of your time, but just a snap to show appreciation.
Yes. Thank you all so much.
Yeah. And that's a wrap. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Yes. Thank you all. I learned from each of you. It was so great to meet you guys, have you here.